my first day of retirement, I spent it doing something, and my wife said, well, I'm going to give you a mandate because I don't want you to do this every day of your retirement. So my first day of retirement, I cleaned out underneath our landline telephone, we have a junk drawer. And I cleaned it out in great detail. And I was very proud to show it off. She's laughing. When she got home, and she was slightly irritated because I moved some things that she didn't want me to move. So she said, I'm going to give you a mandate. You're going to create a website, and you're going to put all this stuff on a website, and you're going to share it with everyone else. And I thought, but hold on a second. I detest technology. I've never designed a website, and I don't know how to do this. I'm not a technology guy. And then I remembered what Tom Petty said about technology, and I unearthed the quote just so I could share that. This was in the Paul Zolo book, and this is in reference to buried treasure. So he had to use a computer to digitize songs and move some things around. He's talking about that, and he said it's the only time it's gotten me into using the computer because I never have before. So so I embraced the challenge. I'm like, okay, what the heck? So I learned how to do it, and and going on to social media and branded accounts and the whole Spotify thing and whatever. And I'm still learning stuff. But it's been, really rewarding because it's out of my comfort zone, and I've done it, and it's all within my control. It's just me sitting there at a desktop computer with a dog by the side for 2 to 6 hours most days. That's it. And then the rest of the time I'm out hiking, snowshoeing or whatever. The first trip there in January 2024, I hadn't even started the site. I just bought the domain, and I was at First Magnitude Brewery, a stone's throw from here. And I'm having my flight of beers, and I noticed on the wall there was a poster for, I can't remember the name, but it's one of the several Tom Petty themed beers that they make, has a name connected. And there were a group of people that were sitting at the table there, and I didn't want to interrupt them, but I did. And I walked over there and said, excuse me, I just want to take a picture of the poster. And they're probably thinking, who the hell is this guy? That's weird. So I took a picture, and they're all at the table. And then they're like, well, why do you want that? And they kept talking. It turns out that, they were all teachers, or a couple of professors at UF, and a couple of them taught at City Lanier, Tom's elementary school. And I thought that was pretty cool. And I've since been back to Gainesville several times. I told you 8 days this past week, and I've been doing site visits and interviews and so on. The site. So I had this in January 2024. I had the domain purchased. I had this conversation at First Magnitude. And about a week later, I got an indication that there was something wrong with my health. And by February, it was diagnosed as kidney cancer. And I thought, oh, this is great. This is Murphy's Law. I worked my whole life, and I retire, and a month later I find out I have cancer. That really sucks. And wood. But knock on wood, everything's good. I had the surgery; it's been removed. I've had follow-up surgeries due to complications and so on. But it has given me something to focus on that's not cancer. It really scrambled my mind. I'm sure there are people that know. But it messes with your mind, and then of course the physical trauma and trying to recover and stuff. So I couldn't go out snowshoeing and skiing and all that stuff during that time. So I'm sitting there working on the site, so that's really been helpful to me. And then so in September 2024, I launched this website. So it's 13 months old, and it's kind of taken on a life of its own, which I didn't expect. So as of yesterday, I had 29,000 unique visitors to the site. That's not one person going 100 times. That's pretty cool. And tens of thousands of social media engagements, anything from emojis to actual, comments and stuff. In terms of stuff I put on social media, hundreds of people writing and saying, thank you for doing the site, or I'm using the site, and I'm hearing that here today. Press coverage, WUFT, Gainesville Sun in town here, the Inside Hook website, the Tom Petty project podcast. Kevin interviewed me, which was cool. The Village's Daily Sun contacted me about a month ago, and it's like, it's the senior citizens coming up to get, and it's like, okay, so anyway, so there's going to be something in the Sun if there isn't already. A couple months ago, I got a message from this doesn't mean anything because I'm not from Gainesville, but WRUF, the local ESPN radio affiliate. It's a student-run thing. They do Gator Game Day, and they talk about football and stuff. And they were contacting me about like Tom Petty's connection to Gainesville and sports or something. I don't even know what I would have said because he kind of hated sports. I was actually traveling, so I couldn't do that. Anyways, okay, so the collaborators, the helpers. If anyone knows information, you can talk to me, you can email me on the website, everywhere you'll find the branded tompettytrail@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. But sources of information, the books, the magazines, the websites, the people, and so on, I need them. And if you're one of them, please contact me. Keith Harbin and his wife Marcia have been just wonderful. They're great people, and he has shown me some things that I wouldn't know about. He said, Tom was my adventure partner, and he's shown me places and told me things that have been, just incredibly helpful, such as, the Lipham Music, Lillian's Music, Glen Springs pool, but not just the surface details that are widely reported, but he talked about finite details. I mean, like Keith's mother, the Pettys didn't have a pool pass, he said, that the Harbins had a pool pass. And so it was the Harbins that would have brought Tom to the Glen Springs pool, which I visited. You can't visit it because it's kind of, you have to get access. It's at a fraternal organization now. It's all kind of a dirty pool now, basically, but it's still there. But anyway, but Keith said Tom's lips really did turn blue. And me being from, growing up in Maine and swimming in 50-degree ocean water, I said, this is 72 degrees. I mean, but, it was Keith who's, Tom's mother worked downtown at the tag office across from Bo Diddley Park. I have that mapped, but it was Keith's mom that brought them down to the Lillian's music store. He said Tom was about 12. Keith, they're just a few days apart, so they were about 12. And I remember walking into Lillian's music store, which of course is mapped, and on the left wall was where the guitar strings were. And I had taken pictures from the outside, but a couple of days ago I stopped by and I got a picture of the left wall, however exciting that is, but it looks different. It looks different now. He took me to places, Briarcliff, which was their first paid gig. It's I guess it's south of town, heading down toward Payne's Prairie or something. I got my directions right, but it's like like an old resort type place or something like that. And they had a gig out there and took me out to Keystone Beach and out on the pier, and they played there, and he talked about the story there. And then the Moose Club, he brought me to the Moose Club, and he told me the story. And those black and white pictures that are circulated, those are Keith's dad that took those pictures, of the Sundowners, that keep getting repurposed. I keep editing them. It's like, yeah, they're there. He took me to again, I'm not a Gainesville guy, so I don't know this, but WDVH, AM radio station that used to exist. And he took me to the studios. It seemed to Helen gone. I can't remember exactly where it was, but it's mapped. and there's still a building there and still a tower. It was in that studio in 1964 that the Sundowners went in studio and they played a couple songs live over the air. That was the first time that Tom Petty was heard over the airwaves from that AM station in Gainesville. And it's mapped, so someone can go there. think there's no historical marker, but you can have your phone and say, gee whiz, you know, and Keith Cardinal's talking about that. And he was in that room, isn't that neat? You know, and that's the purpose of the site. So so the last thing I want to say is that I'm not a technology guy, which I said, but I'm not a smartphone guy. Much to the chagrin of Keith Harbin, who just last night at dinner said, Shawn, I want to tell you that you're irritating me. You're annoying me. I said, I'm sorry, Keith, you can call me on the landline at home in Plattsburgh, New York, anytime you want. But he says, but there's no way to get in touch with you. And I said, what do you know, anyway. And my parents and my sister and everyone's, but I don't have one by choice. And I know I'm stubborn. I can't even log into the Tom Petty Trail website, the domain, without having an encryption code that I rely on my wife's phone to get this code. So I know at some point I'm going to have one of these bloody things.
He's admitting it.
But
You got it on tape.
so how do I navigate around Gainesville without? This is my Tom Petty Trail. I got this back in January of 2024. I wrote to the Gainesville I actually wrote a letter to the Gainesville Chamber of Commerce, I think it was, and said I kind of explained it, and they're probably like, oh my God, and no one has ever used a paper map. This goes back, it's still called Northeast Park and not Tom Petty Park. This is like ancient, but I'm driving around and so on. And granted, it's I have a lot of... Oh, isn't it? I mean, granted, this is kind of cumbersome to kind of pull over on the side of the road and pull out a magnifying glass, and am I on 39th or 38th, and is it a lane or a boulevard or a dead end? Oh my God. So, how I navigate now, primarily, thanks to 75-year-old Keith Harbin, is I got one of his used garments, which I plug into the cigarette lighter, and I program in the addresses, and it works, and it's much easier. I actually look at the map. And I know if I had the phone, Keith told me last night, Shawn, if you had the phone, it would be so much easier. I get that. But you all have the phone. That's what's important. And I encourage you to use the tompettytrail.com. And again, there are these little flyers out here, but there's nothing, you can just pull up the website, tompettytrail.com. And that's the last shameless plug. Okay, I do have time for, I guess, questions, if anyone has any questions.